1, live.
All right, welcome to the Rebel's Edge. I'm Pete Najarian. That's John Najarian. Wait a minute. John looks a hell of a lot different today, doesn't he? Holy smokes. Actually, that's Jared. You finally get the opportunity. Everybody's been asking. Everybody's been wanting to. There he is. There's Jared, our producer. He's like on ESPN. We've got Stanford Steve. Well, there's our man Jared right there. Jared, who does all the things that John talks about all the time, the Bulls, the Bears, and everything else. A lot of fun. Let me say this, Jared. Last week, the Bulls were out. The Bulls were running. I mean, we might as well have been somewhere in Europe with all those Bulls running through the streets because, shoot, man, we were up, 1,600 points for the week. It was absolutely incredible, and it was a lot of fun. And John is in the midst of trying to travel. He's got TSA on one side. He's got somebody else on the other, and they're all pulling on him right now, so he is not here today. But Jared was nice enough to step in. Jared, I'm going to start it off right out of the gate, man. Let's go right to the macro minute. And the macro minute, I think what stands out for me is earnings season. Now, there was a lot of concerns going in about earnings season. Everybody was concerned about what would the numbers look like. Well, the numbers so far overall have looked pretty daggone good. And the backdrop behind those numbers has also been something that, especially last week, you had the Fed pausing twice in the last two different sessions that they've had. They've paused. That's been something that I think the markets obviously have embraced. And with that, we've watched the 10-year dropping significantly, all of that giving us a very, very big week and a lot of earnings. More earnings this week, but we are through a big portion of those S&P 500 earnings. So that's the macro minute. Next, I'm going to jump right away. Fantastic futures.
Fantastic futures.
Love you for that, man. That's always fun. Fantastic futures. What about these futures? Well, let me tell you something. Volatility is something that I talk about all the time. I've been talking about that since the day that I first stepped onto the stage over there at CNBC back in 2007, talking about volatility, introducing people to the options world, looking at the volatility index, the VIX. Well, that VIX has been very volatile. It's had a velocity up and down and all around, and we've been watching this for a while now as it's played out. That big jump all the way up to 23, then the pullback, and then back up to 23 again. But then on the next pullback, shoot, guys, we were looking at 14, 15. As a matter of fact, last Friday, we were in the upper 14s for the volatility index. As a matter of fact, today, primarily been sitting right on that, teetering on that 15 for the volatility index. I think that alone is a huge statement about where we are and what the futures are. And when you look at these futures and you look at what you can do from a trading perspective, just take a look over at the CME. There's a lot of different ways that folks can actually approach and be a position within the volatility that we talk about all the time. Jared, now you're part of this whole thing. It's you and I, baby.
You know, I've got a John Najarian costume over here in my desk from last Halloween. I should have put it on before we went live.
You should have. What do you put, like a thing over your head? Anyway.
Yeah, we've got Prison John and Date John, depending on which hat he's wearing. Last year, everybody came dressed as John.
Oh, you gotta love it. Gotta love it.
I'm here in the Market Rebellion headquarters in Chicago.
That's nice. Good spot, man. It's beautiful up there. I know it's a little bit cooler than where I am, but you know what? That's okay. It's fall. We're now that we're into November. By the way, November happens to be one of the better months on the calendar in terms of the stock market itself. So keep that in the back of your mind. And last week was great example of exactly that. As we got into November, boy, the markets just started rising to the upside almost immediately. Blue-green vacations is where we're going next. That's our first stock, BVH. Now, this one's pretty daggone interesting, and here's why. Hilton is coming after them. And when I say coming after them, they're not just kind of coming after them. They absolutely came in with a $75 per share bid and said, we want you. We love your organic growth. We love what you're doing as a company. This is a company, by the way, that was trading $21 to about $35 until today. And then we jumped all the way up almost to 75. Last I looked, it was trading somewhere a little bit closer to 73. But this is something where obviously Hilton sees incredible value here. What do you think about this one? I know that you're a big guy into this world, right? You're a big timeshare guy, don't you?
I only do timeshares, actually, Pete. I think that it's interesting because the stock's up 105%. And I got to say, it's because somebody's buying timeshares, and it's Hilton. Have you ever had one? I've never considered it.
You know what? It's one of those things where you hear those little promos on the radio when you're driving in your car on a Saturday morning. You hear these guys talking about it, and there's people who talk positively. There's a lot of people talking negatively about it. I've never really jumped into that whole world. I've used Airbnb. I do that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I've done vacations here and there. I've never really gotten to the timeshare. I've been to Hawaii a lot in my life, and I can tell you, there is where they push those timeshares. Oh my!
Oh, no
God.
kidding.
If you're in Hawaii, they always give you the, hey, just come over here. We'll give a little, maybe you'll have a drink. Maybe you'll have a good time. Maybe you'll sign the papers. All right. Next, we're going to jump on to Fresh Pet, FRPT. Now, this one's pretty interesting because of the fact that this is near and dear to me. I've always been a huge pet lover. I think you always want to take care of your pet the best you can. What that means, though, is are you going to be able to afford the expense? Now, everybody's used to the kibble side, and then all of a sudden now you go to the fresh side, and everybody's got their own opinions on this whole thing. I can tell you this. The opinions so far in Fresh Pet have gone in a good way really rapidly. If you look at what they've done, their net sales are up 32% year over year, up over 200 million. So a lot of things going really, really well for them right now. They thought they were going to have another loss. They didn't. They still do have a loss, but they've cut those losses down dramatically. There's a lot of good things going on right now for Fresh Pet. It's up about 20% today. I'll tell you what, the shorts are getting squeezed, and you hear me talk about that all the time, Jared, but there's a short interest over 15% in here. So those guys that are short this stock are reaching up, and that's part of that 20%. Because this is a stock that's under huge pressure and going to the upside in a big, big way. And those shorts are not feeling too good today. How about you? You got animals. What about you? What do you do? Do you use Fresh Pet?
No, I don't. And, it's something I might be interested in trying, but I have to say the big competition in my house is what's actually on my plate. That's what they want. And they're going to keep asking for what they want. So I don't know. I don't know enough about this. But
I'll tell you,
yeah, I'm not jumping on it.
I can tell you firsthand, my son is into the raw diet for his dog, which is very similar to what this Fresh Pet is really pushing. And I can tell you it's expensive, but it also gives you a little bit of insight into the world that we are in right now, that people are willing still to pay up for their animals when it comes to the food side of things. And that's kind of my takeaway for that. How about Moon Lake Immunotherapeutics? This one's a pretty interesting one, Jared, because they're going in, and we're always talking about these biotech companies. Number one, they've got to get something out there where they can actually start making money and be better for their balance sheet. And we talk about this all the time. You've got to get past phase 2. You've got to get past phase 3. And if you can do that, which is this company right now is working on phase 3, trying to get into that. But as they're getting into that process, the problem is, how well are you doing when you're doing some of the tests that go along with this whole thing in that phase of the clinical testing and these trials that are going on? It's interesting. They've got a very good balance sheet. They do have massive shorts. People are betting against the fact that they are going to make some progress here. I don't know if you have any inclination on this one, or anything that you're thinking about when you look at this stock, but I can tell you it's down 23% today, Jared. And I think a big portion of that is because, some of the numbers looked pretty good with some of the trials that they're doing, but there was one or two that really stood out that weren't so great. And unfortunately, that's all you need sometimes for people to start turning and saying, I'm selling, I'm out.
Yeah, from a short-term perspective, that might not be a bad way to look at it. I've had some autoimmune diagnoses in my family recently, so I'm a little bit more aware of this space than I generally am in terms of biopharma and healthcare in general. And I have to say, there's a huge blue ocean in terms of being able to treat some of these diseases in a new way. So long term, I'm bullish on the space. I can't speak to this company in particular, but I think that there's a lot of space. So, for my own part, I might look at this one a little more closely, particularly when it's down.
And I think we're all excited about, what can happen. And, you hear us talk about it all the time, Jared, but we want these biotechs to have success. We want them to get these drugs out. Yep. But sometimes it's just not meant to be. And obviously you don't want to have more harm than help. And that sometimes is a big part of this whole thing as well. All right, we're going to jump to Dish Network, right? So you've got massive shorts. You've got a huge free cash flow issue going on. The burn rate here is incredible. You look at this stock, it's at a 52-week low. We're talking about $4.20 is where this thing dropped down to today, Jared. They are in trouble. They're under the gun right now. That seems to be something that they just cannot shoot straight right now. They're losing subscribers. When you look at the numbers, they lost 64,000 subscribers this past quarter. They gained 30,000 a year ago quarter. So think about that kind of a flip. There's some real problems going on right now for Dish. And a lot of people are talking about bankruptcy. I'm not saying it. I'm just telling you what I'm reading. And what I'm reading is the Dish has got some problems. First of all, do you use Dish? Do you use the satellite? What do you do, man? Or are you a guy who's got that plug in? You just go, hey man, here we go.
I'm a millennial, and we don't subscribe to these kinds of things. No, we have the individual apps. We have Apple TVs and Chromecasts and things like that. So no, I've been pretty bearish on Dish for a long time. Yeah. It's still good for sports. Yeah. But sports is moving into other places too. So that's I think that those days are numbered where they've got the monopoly. Well, monopoly is a strong word. The wrong word, in fact, but you still have to go to the traditional cable providers for high quality sports streaming. But I think that's going to go away unless they can cut some deals with some of these streaming apps and gain access to some of that. Because right now we're in a position where Netflix keeps going up, Hulu keeps going up, Disney keeps going up, and we have to subscribe to all of these different services in order to get access to everything we want to watch. And that creates an opportunity for companies like Dish. I don't know if they're going to be able to capitalize on it, but personally, I might throw a few bucks at Dish just in case they can.
Like it. All right, we're going to jump into a little bit of sports, and we won't take too long. But one of the things you've heard me talk about a little bit more and more, Jared, recently has been parity in college football, parity in the NFL. And there are other sides to the parity, but what I'm looking at is when I look at the NFL right now, sure, there's some terrible teams out there. There's also a couple of teams that are pretty daggone good. But, most of the teams, it seems like they're 4-4, they're 5-4, they're 4-5. It's amazing to look around the NFL and just see that it literally comes down to any given Sunday, just like the movie. I mean, at any given Sunday, somebody can beat somebody else in the NFL. And that's just the way it's gone this year. But I wanted to focus on this. There's one surprise team this year that nobody's been talking about nearly as much. And I know that you're less of a football fan than I am. I get it, Jared. But how about the fact that it's not Philadelphia that everybody's, everybody thinks, well, Philadelphia's pretty daggone good. Kansas City, pretty daggone. How about Miami, San Francisco, Detroit having a good year? But the team that nobody keeps kind of getting their eyes on are the Baltimore Ravens. The Baltimore Ravens have absolutely destroyed people this year. And when you go back and you look, yes, they have 2 losses. But when you look at this team right now, Lamar Jackson at quarterback, their offense is absolutely incredible. Their defense is suffocating. They have it on both sides of the ball. They're very similar in a lot of ways to San Francisco, but nobody's talking about Baltimore. We all talk about San Francisco. We talk about Philadelphia, Miami, and that great offense that they've got down there. But when you want a complete team, take a look at what's going on with the Baltimore Ravens. I think this is a team. Now, it's Jim Harbaugh's brother, John, who's the coach there. These 2 brothers are pretty amazing. Whether you like what Jim's been doing at Michigan or whatever, John's had a lot of success, obviously, with Baltimore. Jim's had success everywhere he's ever been, and huge success this year, undefeated at Michigan, dominating the entire college football world. But I'll tell you what, these Baltimore Ravens, John Harbaugh has done an amazing job keeping this thing going, trading for the right guys, not overpaying the wrong guys, but paying the players that they need to pay, like Lamar Jackson. I think it's an amazing team. Do you have any thoughts on this one at all in terms of you've been watching the NFL much this year or no?
I haven't, but I haven't much. But I do have to say I'm excited about Detroit because I'm a Michigan man myself, and I grew up rooting for Barry Sanders and wanting those guys to be champions, and man, it was a long wait.
You know what?
No, I haven't kept up with Baltimore though. That's interesting, and I'll keep an eye on them.
And I don't think anybody else is. I mean, I really don't think so, Jared. I don't think I don't ever see it on when I'm watching some of the sports stuff on ESPN. It's always Philadelphia, right? Or if it's not Philadelphia, it's San Francisco, Kansas City. Oh, Pat Mahomes and everything. I get all of that. I understand it. But I think Baltimore has been overlooked for far too long. And that's a team this year that continues to get a little bit better every single week. And the dominance on offense and defense, their defense is way in front of everybody else. They hold people to less than 2 touchdowns per game, which in a sport that's made for the offenses to score, that's pretty extraordinary. All right, we're going to jump to the next one. By the way, you were probably in the stands back in the day when I was playing against your Detroit Lions. You guys were good back then. You had Barry Sanders, had some good quarterbacks. Barry was the toughest running back I think I ever had to play against in my entire life. Better than Walter Payton, in my opinion. Better than a lot of guys. He really was a special player. So I'm glad you brought that name up. He's a good guy too.
I might have been in the stands when you were playing against U of M too.
Oh God! Then you saw me get beat to the ground. Anyway, all right. So now we're going to go to college football real quick. The best one-loss team. Now I realize you're not as much into this as I am, and probably John is, but there is a list of different schools right now where I'm looking at them and I see Alabama, Ole Miss, Oregon, Penn State, Texas, Louisville, right? They all have one loss. And trying to figure out, okay, as we kind of navigate deeper into the season now, is there a team that of that group is the next one to kind of slide right up in there and get somewhere maybe if somebody gets dropped? So I'll give you this. I think it's Alabama and Oregon. Now, the problem that I see for Alabama is this. They did lose at home. They lost to a very good Texas team, another one of the teams with only one loss. They lost to Texas, and Texas lost to Oklahoma, and, there's this whole chain. But Alabama was at home, and they lost that game. That's a big deal to a lot of people. If you lose at home or on the road. How about Oregon? Oregon goes up to Washington. Now, Oregon's got the best offense pretty much in all of football in almost every category. They run the ball well, throw the ball well. They got a guy who's probably, in my opinion, should win the Heisman Trophy, Bo Nix, the quarterback, who used to play for Auburn long ago. But I'll tell you, it's a heck of a team, and they went up to Washington and lost after a really great, tight game on the road. Pac-12, I think, this year is the best conference in football. Still think so. I think it's Oregon, but I know you're not as much into it as I am, Jared, but, you hear about this stuff. Is it Alabama just because the world loves Alabama and the fact that the Alabama's always been somewhere in that playoff hunt and Final Four for football?
And you're right. I haven't been following as much this season, in particular this season, but I'm gonna go a different way and say Penn State has been remarkable in their ability to kind of persevere through a lot of distractions and other kinds of problems. So I wouldn't be too surprised if they came through on this one.
Yep, they're a good football team. And now we get to the toughest part of the season for Michigan and Ohio State and Penn State, because now they start playing more of the top tier. So we'll see where that all falls not too long from now, because Ohio State and Michigan right now, they're sitting up top, but they got to play each other. So at some point, somebody's going to lose that game. Well, Jared, thanks a lot.
Ohio State will lose that game.
Jared, I really appreciate you jumping in. We had John in the airport. He was on, he was off, he was on. He finally lost connection, and we said, the heck with it. We're going to move on. So really appreciate you stepping in. It's not always easy. I know it's kind of really, really, really last minute, but we appreciate it. You made it a lot of fun. It's always
Thanks
great.
for having me.
Thanks, Jared.
See ya.